The council is now in session. The council is now in session. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Culver,
Present.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Sassen,
Here.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Here.
Mayor Herbig.
If there are no objections, Mayor Herbig will be excused. Hearing none, Mayor Herbig is excused. Next on the agenda is the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the city of Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Saxawatl, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish peoples. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the First Peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working toward a future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land. Next on the agenda, please stand for the flag salute. Next on the agenda is the agenda approval. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved as published. Hearing no objections, the agenda is approved. Next, we have our proclamation for Juneteenth to be read by Councilmember Culver.
Thank you. Whereas on the first day of January in the year of 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued a momentous decree known as the Emancipation Proclamation, a pivotal step in the long and arduous journey to abolish the inhumane institution of slavery in the United States. And whereas the culmination of the struggle, the cessation of slavery, gave birth to a day of profound significance known as Juneteenth. This day is acknowledged as the oldest recognized public commemoration of the cessation of slavery in the United States. And whereas Juneteenth is not only a commemoration of the liberation of African Americans from the bonds of slavery, but also serves as a grand celebration of the strides made towards improving education and increasing opportunity within the African American community. It honors the courage, resilience, and determination that led to their freedom and progress. And whereas, on a broader scale, the celebration of Juneteenth serves as a poignant reminder for every person of the hallowed promises that form the bedrock of the American dream: freedom, equality, and the opportunity for all to pursue their ambitions without hindrance or prejudice. And whereas Juneteenth was officially declared a statewide holiday on May 13th, 2021, and in alignment with this declaration, the Kenmore City Council adopted resolution number 22381, thereby affirming Juneteenth as an official city holiday, a testament to the city's commitment to remembering our history and promoting equality. And whereas, despite over 155 years having passed since the formal conclusion of chattel slavery in the United States, the nation continues to grapple with the deeply ingrained and pervasive remnants of discriminatory systems and structural racism that still affect many aspects of our society. And whereas the city of Kenmore is steadfastly dedicated to creating a city where all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background, feel safe, respected, and loved in their place of residence, fostering a culture of inclusivity and unity. Now, therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2025 as a day to commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth throughout the City of Kenmore, We urge all residents to unite with the City Council in this meaningful observance, to honor the past, celebrate progress, and work towards a future of true equality and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Culver. So next we have, where's the fun? Interim City Manager, where's the fun?
Well, we have a couple of things that we're highlighting in Where's the Fun tonight. And the first one, of course, are our Inglemore Rowers. They competed against 230 clubs and schools entering the Women's Varsity 8 and 4 and stood out as one of very few public schools in the field. Several athletes from Inglemore raced in both events, which was a strategic decision that was made to support the team as a whole, even if it came with some challenges. The Women's Varsity 8 finished 18th in the time trial, and they missed the semifinal by 0.24 seconds. And that race was less than 2.5 hours after the women's 4, and they started the final with a damaged skeg, and yet they still surged to second in the C final. And the Varsity 4 placed third in the time trial, then overcame a snapped steering cable just before their semifinal, but they still advanced and went on to finish 6th in the final, just 6 seconds off the winning time. So they overall responded with grit, determination, resilience, and heart, and we're very proud of our rowers at Inglemore. And then one other item we have, the pancake breakfast. You can see Hank had a great time. The North Shore Fire Department held their annual safety fair and pancake breakfast on June 7th at Fire Station 51, and there were hundreds of community members of all ages, as you can see in the picture, to see fire demonstrations, explore emergency vehicles, and bring their teddy bears to the teddy bear clinic for repairs. They hang out with service dogs, had pancakes, and they mingle with the Kenmore Police Department, the North Shore Utility District, and other community services. You can see that they had a great time. We want to thank our new regional fire authority, North Shore Fire, for hosting this very popular annual event. And that's Where's the Fun.
Thank you. We are having some amazing fun here in Kenmore. Next, we have public comments. Welcome to the council's meeting. Please address your comments to the mayor and council. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. If there are more than 20 speakers, time will be reduced to 2 minutes per speaker. The clerk will call your name when it's your turn. The presiding officer may choose to alternate between in-person and online comments. Please state your name and city of residence and keep within the allotted time. To make every person feel welcome and safe here, please refrain from booing, clapping, heckling, yelling, or other interruptions. Please note, under Washington State Law, RCW 42.17a.555, public comment time may not be used to support or oppose candidates or ballot measures. Thank you for keeping remarks focused on city business. This meeting is recorded for transparency. Thank you for being here and for sharing your input respectfully. Clerk.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. At this point, we have 6 guests on site wishing to speak and 1 guest online. There is a request for 2 of our members to allot 7 minutes for their speaking time, as they do request translation services.
If there are no objections, we will allow 7 minutes for those who need interpretation. Hearing none, their 7 minutes are approved. Thank you.
Great. In that case, we will take our guests in this order: Wael Othman, Hussam Othman, Joy Shui, Jamie Cho, Jen Jin, Patrick O'Brien, and Stacy Valenzuela online. At this point, I will approach the podium to assist with those who need translation services.
Okay. Hi, my name is Wael Othman, and I want just to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at your town hall meeting. I want to I want to bring to your attention the pain and suffering that my father is going through since the court last week granted his next door neighbor, Agnes McGinnis, protection order against his caregiver, Zen Jin. Jen has been his caregiver for the last 17 years, and she became part of the family. And that's why she calls him uncle, because in our culture, if somebody is older than you, in like a sign of respect, we address him as uncle. Now Zen is terrified to even get near the building because she's afraid that Agnes might fabricate some scenario that leads to the arrest of Zen. Zen has a 10-year protection order against Agnes, and Agnes has been violating the protection order time after time, and the police has never done anything to stop her. Agnes installed surveillance cameras like pointed at every corner of the unit, the bedroom, the living room, entrance to the apartment, and even to the parking garage. She's recording every movement that Zen is making. Also, I want to bring to your attention that Agnes tricked my sister last week by asking her to sign a declaration. And she told my sister, I want you just to say that I want you to sign it that Zen is not blood related to your father, because she calls him uncle. And that's why my sister agreed to sign the declaration. My sister commanded the English language is very poor, so she signed it. And after I read the declaration, I realized that Agnes added so many things, so many harmful things, like against Zen. Zen is a really nice person. We've known her for like a long time. She's really becoming like part of our family. And now she cannot go to the apartment, take care of my father. My father, he's legally blind. He's 89 years old. He can't do anything by himself. He needs somebody to take care of him. And to find somebody to care for him, it's a very long procedure, lengthy procedure, because the state, they have very strict rules about, people who care for elderly people. And it's not that easy to find somebody just like that. Just put an ad on Craigslist and there we go, you find somebody. So what I want, I want you to do whatever you can, like within your reach and power, to maybe you can influence the court to reverse their order.
Thank you.
So Zen can go back and start caring for my father again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ahmad, before you is Mr. Hassan. Would you say hello?
مرحبا، معك أحمد مترجم اللغة العربية. كل ما سيقال سيترجم في سرية.
In a moment, we're going to turn the microphone on and begin translation. Have 7 minutes together.
طيب يا فندم، في خلال دقائق سوف يشتغل مكبر الصوت، وسيكون معك 7 دقائق. سوف تتحدث إلى المترجم، وسوف يقوم المترجم بترجمة الكلام للغة الإنجليزية.
طيب.
Okay.
Let's begin.
سوف نبدأ.
أهلين.
ابدأ الشهادة.
نعم.
ابدأ الشهادة.
أشهد أن أقول الحق.
بلش احكي بلد.
نعم.
خلص احكي اللي بدك اياه.
أحكي.
احكي.
هذا الإنسان بتشتغل معي 17 سنة أكيد. يعني صادقة في عملها، صادقة في مواعيدها، صادقة في أي شيء. إنسانة يعني مثالية بالنسبة لعملها لشغلها. والشغل اللي بتشتغله مش شغل سهل. وإن هي يعني بتحافظ على شخص لا بسمع ولا بشوف ولا بمشي مظبوط. فهذا يعني شيء work very hard. and now she can what I said هالكيتها بتقدرش تيجي على الابارت على الكاندو لانها خايفة من الجيران يحكوا. يعني الجارة تقول زي ما حكوا لها البوليس يجي ياخذك ويحطوك في السجن. هذا شخص إنسانة يعني مش من أهل هالحكي اللي بيحكوه. إنسانة خدومة بتخدم أي واحد يريد خدمة بتخدمه. وصادقة في عملها وصادقة في شغلها في بيتها وصادقة كل شيء. وهالكيت بتجيش على تساعدني في الليل لأن أنا
لحظة.
نعم.
لحظة، المترجم يترجم كلامك.
نعم.
Okay, so this person have been working with me for almost 17 years now. Someone who is honest at their work. They're always on time, and she has been taking care of a person who can't take care of himself. Now she's afraid to come over to the condo because of the neighbors and what they're saying. She's afraid of herself because of what they're saying. Even though she didn't hurt anyone, she's always trying to help. She's always honest at her work. She didn't do anything to hurt anyone. كمل.
نعم. كمل. يعني وأنا بطلب إنه يعني يشجعوها ترجع على تساعدني لأني بقدرش أساعد نفسي. واحد لا بشوف ولا بسمع مزبوط ولا بيقدر يمشي بتساعدني في كل إشي. لما بروح على امرجنسي ولا تقعد معي 3 ساعات وساعتين. يعني إنسانة خلوقة. أعتقد يعني إنسانة يحق لها أن يساعدوها في المحنة اللي هي فيه. يساعدوها نطلب يعني إنهم يساعدوها في هالشغلة اللي ترجع على الكاندوم تبعها لأنها ساكنة فوق ما أنا ساكن. ولما بحتاج أي إشي على رأسا بتيجي بتساعدني يعني أنا بطلب المساعدة إنهم يساعدوني. شو بدي أعمل؟ شخص عمره 88 سنة شو بقدر يسوي؟ فبطلب منهم المساعدة إنهم يساعدوني في يتكلموا إلها إنها ترجع على محلها ما حدا رايح يعني يأذيها أو يعمل معها أي شيء. هذا اللي بطلبه.
So I'm just here to encourage her to come back. She has been always helping me, but now I can't even go to the emergency because she was helping me to go there, and I ask you to help her in her time of need. For me, as an 88-year-old, I just want to know how I can help her to get her out of this situation. And I need you to help her as well. عندك أي شيء تحب تضيفه؟
نعم. عندي شيء
أي
إني
شيء
بقول
تحب
لك
تضيفه؟
يساعدوني إنها ترجع على البيت تساعدني لأن ما بقدر أساعد نفسي. شو أعمل؟ شو أسوي؟ يعني شخص 88 سنة شو بقدر يعمل؟ بطلب من اللي بحكموا في هالحكم انها يقنعوها ترجع شو على البيت عندي على الكاندو.
Yes, I just need you to tell me how can I go back home? Because I can't go back home without her help. I need to go back to my condo.
That concludes his testimony. Request that city staff reach out to him directly.
طيب يا فندم، لو هذا هو آخر شيء في شهادتك، طيب الكونسل سوف يخبرك أو سوف يخبروك وسوف يتواصلون معك بشكل مباشر. تمام؟
طيب يابا، شكرا.
Okay, thank you.
Joyce Xu, followed by Jamie Cho.
Hello, council members, and thank you for another opportunity to greet you this evening as well. My name again is Joyce Shui, and I'm a pro bono attorney for Junjin, who you see here as in the City Council Hall, and have also worked a bit with Hussam and have gotten to know Weil recently as well. You heard from Zen last week, and you just heard from both Mr. Othmans this evening about the immense havoc that racism wreaks on people and families. A lot of times when I give these talks, or if I'm in court, I struggle with whether to say victim or survivor, because we don't want to feel ourselves as victims. We don't want to contribute to that narrative. And so I will say survivor, but it is with wistful hope rather than a reality at the current time, because the abuse is so chronic and so invisible. Tonight, with the proclamation of Juneteenth, thank you, I'd like to give some concrete examples of what racism shows up like. We know easily the things like the racial slurs that we have heard this racist couple hurl at Zen and another neighbor. It also looks like telling them that they eat weird food and that they're going to harm their pets. It's something that actually came up before I then heard it on national news, so it seems to be part of some kind of national playbook, I suppose. But what it is beyond those things that are maybe a little more obvious to people is how it shows up with the police force. It is a police officer coming to respond to the racist couple and treating them like they are the victim, and that the victim is weird was one of the comments that was made, and it's on a body cam. And a police officer saying, I understand her just fine when she asks for interpretation. It's not about whether he can understand her English, which is her third language. It is about whether she can communicate effectively. And I urge the City Council to recognize that and train the police better. Racism also looks like multiple squad cars coming, 3 with flashing lights to her. Somebody who, as you've heard, is kind, who drives, as I said last week, a school bus, who works with special needs kids. And why are the police responding with 3 squad cars? Why are they responding at all to somebody who has said she's called the police 20 times on her? Racism also looks like breaking up a family of immigrants. You've heard that they have been together for 17 plus years. They are close, they're loving, they take care of each other. And this woman and this couple have interfered in a way that they use the systems, they use the police, and they are also trying to break up the family with the sister and getting her to sign
Thank
a
you.
deceitful declaration. So thank you for the time, and please contact us.
Jamie Cho.
Hello, good evening, council members and deputy mayor. My name is Jamie Cho, and I want to ask all of us, is it justice for all or is it justice for some? As we were standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, I reflect on the state of our country and the destruction that's happening all around us and abolishing the rights, particularly of Black and Brown folks who gets to experience justice. Look what it took today for Ms. Jin and Mr. Othman to be here today. Who gets justice? This is my second time giving public comment in Kenmore, even though I don't live in this city. I would like to speak about the harm that's caused when racism is left unchecked. And there is no accountability for making sure that people in systems are not upholding the injustice that they vow or make commitments to end. Racism is a form of violence that not only harms a person's physical well-being from this repeated long-term stress of interactions and uncertainty of safety, but also psychological harm that makes one second guess their right to feel safe, to be at peace and do normal everyday things. When someone buys a home, they expect they will be able to live there a long time. They expect that they'll be able to live in peace. They expect that their neighbors will treat them with respect. And they expect that if issues arise, they can be solved amicably. They also expect that if the police are called, that the police would be trauma-informed, not trauma-inducing. And if systems fail to protect the victim, I would expect that local elected officials who live in this city where this is happening would not be only appalled, but would take actions to ensure that this city is not only safe for those who are white and privileged. I hope the City Council takes steps toward accountability, which means following up when you say you will, that the City Council will honor Juneteenth by making sure that racism doesn't continue to exist in Kenmore and push vulnerable populations out. I do also want to just express deep gratitude to those council members who have responded to our request to meet. Thank you.
Jin.
Can you hear us?
Yeah,
Okay, you may begin.
你好，
哎，你好，
我是普通话翻译编辑，请说。
好，谢谢大家给我再一次的机会在这里讲，我真的是
Well, thank you for giving me the chance to speak to you here.
我真的很害怕，可能别人没有这种体会，因为我就住在他隔壁，
等一下。Okay, I have lots of fear because I am living right next to that person or them.
也因为你不知道他什么时候就会打电话给警察。
This is interpreter. I need a clarification. 您说的他是男的他还是女的他？
是女的她，女的她。
Oh, okay. So I don't know when she will call the police.
也因为有好几次我都不知道我做了什么，他就打电话给警察。比如说有一次我要进到我的车库，我车库门开了，他就带着个狗慢慢的从我车子前面走过，我只能停下来。
等一下。Okay, so it happened several times that I don't know what I did, and then she called the police. And then there was one time I went to my garage and then she snuck there with a dog around my vehicle.
也然后我就停下来让他走过去，他跟他的女儿还有一条狗，然后他就叫他的女儿拍照片，拍我照片。
I have to let her pass that area first. So she passed by and then she was with her daughter and the dog and then she took photos.
然而我就我就爬车爬到我的车库里面去，好了以后我就回家了。回家我就要煮饭，我不知道过了15分钟左右，警察敲门。
等一下。Okay, then I keep proceeding, went to my garage, and then after that I went home. I was doing cooking. Well, I don't know what exactly happened. Then the police came.
因为敲门我就一直很紧张，因为他们以前有敲过门，然后 然后我就看那个照相机，一看是警察，我就不知道我做了什么错事，警察来了。
So because, you know, they were knocking at the door, I got very nervous. Then I saw it was the police and I got even more nervous. I just didn't know what exactly going on. I don't know what's going on.
我根本就没做什么事。后来我就从我的阳台上往下面一看，3部警车就停在我们的 parking lot 的地方。我吓得
I
我不敢
didn't
开
know.
门。
Okay, so I didn't know what happened. So I went to the porch or either the balcony and I looked downstairs. I saw 3 police cars there. So I was so scared and I freaked out and I was afraid to open the door.
我什么都没做，我还是等他穿过我的车子前面，我不知道我做错了什么。他三部警车，3个 police 来我家，我真的很怕。
I mean, I have no idea what happened. I didn't know what's going on. And I let that I let her pass my garage area first. And there were 3 police cars there. I was so scared.
我觉得我不知道要说什么，然而我打电话，我假如打911，我要求because 我的英文不好，我说我要求讲中文，他们说哦可以，你就等。我报警，每一次报警都要花2到3个小时。
Yeah, so I was scared. I called 911, and because of my language barrier, I request for an interpreter. So every time when I call the police, it takes 2 to 3 hours.
现在真的，我看到警察我怕，我看到警车也怕，我不知道应该怎么办。好像我就觉得他们跟警察有很好的关系，希望不是这样。但是在我的想象中，就是有这层关系，要不然怎么会有这种事情发生？还有一次。
等一下 ，sorry. So I feel very scared once I see police officer or either police car. I just feel like there must be something between them and the police. You know, like they have some kind of like something between them, but I hope it's not like that. I just don't know what is actually going on. Things happen like these.
也因为每一次都是他欺负了我，他打电话给警察，但是我不知道他是怎么样跟警察说的，然后警察就是过来，因为我的语言不行，所以有很多事情我就忍耐了。他假如欺负我，就1点小时就给他欺负吧，因为很麻烦，我就要打电话要等2、3个小时。就这一次，后来我就马上打电话给我的律师、我的朋友，他们都到我家里来帮助我。我们花了整整4个小时。
Okay, now, this is interpreter. I didn't quite get everything this time, but every time it was them did something bad to me or bully me, and then they call the police, and I don't know what they tell the police about what happened. But because of my language barrier, so every time, you know, if it's like not a big deal, if they did something bad to me, I just try to tolerate it and put up with it.
This time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick O'Brien.
Pat O'Brien, Kenmore. First, let's look at the agenda here. And I'd say that there's something to do with Swamp Creek here. And I would ask the city to look into land that's been taken from people who had houses next to Swamp Creek, and that's in the past. There's some court cases that you should look at for code violation. And they took the home of a lady, I think it was a Nigerian lady that had 5 kids and her husband had died. So why don't you look into that? Because that kind of comports with this, what these people are here for, not getting understanding in what the city wants or what their rights are. So then anything to do with Swamp Creek, of course, you got to take in consideration the heron nests. Number one, people come from all over to take pictures of that. It's beloved, and you don't want any encroachment there. You certainly don't want a 5-story parking garage in the way. And it should be the priority for all salmon is Swamp Creek. It's deeper. It goes into Snohomish County, and the Jack in the Box program, they've spent $10 million in acquiring the property and doing the design work. They need $30 million to open 150 feet of stream, and that isn't going to help any non-existent salmon. That's a bad idea. You ought to shut that down. Then I left you a little a love note, and you'll get that tomorrow, and it's kind of a speaking points of what I wish I had time to do. And I encourage you to increase the public hearing speaking time to 5 minutes from 3, because you cannot talk about a topic in 3 minutes. But anyway, this has to do with how we're hamstringing our future by investing in a maintenance facility for $30 to $70 million of end cost. And Lake Point is going to be, who knows, but it's a designated hazardous waste site that we've not done the testing on. You have not done core sampling. You have not had an honest report on the 13 wells that's demanded by Washington State versus Pioneer Towing. It's a total waste of money because there's an opportunity up on the hill. You've got Bastyr that is not getting the sufficient student support, money, what have you, and they want to sell off part of that park and put high density in and make money on a transaction that was only done to support educational processes. It was not meant, the Catholic Church could have sold that property for $1.5 billion 30, 40, 50 years ago. They did not intend it to, oh, well, we'll just build a few condos here, the public won't notice. No, that just puts density in the park. And then you also have the people at the lodge going broke. We should look for a regional swimming facility right up there with the money.
Mr. Bryan, thank you.
I need another minute.
We're now moving on to our virtual speaker. Stacy Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We hear you. Go on.
Thank you. Congrats to the North Shore School District rowers who paid their share and are the only group that pays rent for the Kenmore Boathouse facility. But the $220,000 they pay fails to go towards any fees or expenses. Our taxpayer millions was used for park and facilities show that they should be open to all residents. This includes picnic shelters. This facility should be shared with a different club that will pay their own rent, utilities, maintenance, landscape, signs, rather than one that defaulted on over $500,000. Taxpayers loaned money, which was requested several times to be collected and repaid to the taxpayer funds. We had a peaceful No Kings protest with 200 to 250 both First LD representatives and council members attended. The majority of our residents are disappointed that the Planning Commission submission of missing middle housing of a quarter mile along the transit corridor was not adopted by the council. Majority of our residents are disappointed that the project presented as senior housing was bait and switch to Plymouth Housing first for those that have drug addiction issues. That the second senior housing at Too High Workforce 50% AMI fell through. We are also disappointed that the Imagine Housing Habitat for Humanity, the approach, will not be built for 5 years in the future, and after many more will likely be unhoused in Kenmore. So important are the needs of 50% AMI and below affordable housing. Why is it not the priority, and why is it not enforced in the TOD? Especially concerning is increased taxes affecting our very low and fixed income residents. When the city discussed raising water, utility, garbage, cable, surface water, and car registration, we were promised that there would be senior discounts. Where are they? Based on the increase of area median income, seniors at our Kenmore senior housing will soon be priced out as well. Many at our manufactured home community have been priced out over the last few years. Our neighbors, as reported by Lake City Partners, slept in the bus stop to be able to qualify for the senior women's shelter. Yet, why does King County have several empty hotels not housing various homeless? When will Kenmore take action on the priority of affordable housing? Our priced out seniors, our priced out families, when will we take care of them? What is going on here? Although we appreciate the money that goes to HopeLink, it's so low for the food that they bring to keep people eating. What about the other services? Please hear our cries. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other speakers signed up.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank each of our commenters this evening and acknowledge the courage it takes to come forward and share your experiences with the council. As the mayor directed staff last week, I would like to direct staff to follow up with Ms. Jen and Mr. Othman related to the issues they presented tonight. And just want to thank you for coming forward. We have one presentation. Next on the agenda, we have a presentation for this evening, Association of Washington Cities update presented by Association of Washington Cities CEO, Deanna. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Consent agenda. I'm sorry. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions? Or any discussions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The consent agenda is passed unanimously. Next, we have a presentation for this evening, Association of Washington Cities update presented by AWC CEO Deanna Dawson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor O'Kane and members of the council. Thanks for inviting me to be here this evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you.
Great. And I'm so sorry I can't be there with you in person tonight, but it's the last week of school, so it's a challenging week to be on the road. So, but I'm really glad to be here with you on Zoom, and I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, and I'm going to share a presentation with me. So let me just do that. Okay. And can you see my presentation okay?
Yes,
We
we
see it.
can.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's see here. So as the Deputy Mayor said, my name is Deanna Dawson, and I'm the CEO of the Association of Washington Cities. It's great to see so many of you. Many of you know me from my background previously working with the Sound Cities Association with you there in King County. And now I am the CEO of AWC since June of 2021. Some of you may recall also that I am a recovering elected official. I used to serve on the Edmond City Council from 2001 through 2008, your neighbors to the north. So it's great to be here on a Monday night. It was Tuesday when I was on council, but it feels like old days being at a council meeting. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit tonight about the Association of Washington Cities and all that we do. We are a nonprofit corporation. We're not a public entity, but all 281 cities and towns in Washington are voluntary members of the association, including the city of Kenmore, and we're very glad to have you as a member. EWC actually consists of 4 separate but related corporations. I'm here primarily to talk about our 501c4 arm, the Association of Washington Cities, but we also do have some other entities that we work with and that we oversee, including an employee benefit trust, which I'll speak about a little bit later. We've got a risk management service agency, which is a risk pool that provides basically insurance coverage to cities like yours, as well as we have a 501c3 arm that promotes civic engagement. And Kenmore is a member of several of our pooling programs that we have at AWC. You're a member of what we call our retro pool. That's a program that provides the city with services to help keep your workers in the city safe. And we do claims management for anybody who is injured on the job in the city. And by being a member of the retro pool, the city also earns refunds on the premiums that they pay to labor and industry. So it's a great way to join with your fellow cities to get some extra services for your city as well as to save money. We also help Kenmore stay in compliance with your federal drug and alcohol regulations for your commercial drivers within the city through our Drug and Alcohol Consortium. And then Kenmore is also a member of our healthcare trust. So your city staff get their healthcare coverage through that trust, and the city gets some benefit options from that. And you also get support from our staff and significant cost savings to the city. And one of the things that I'm excited to tell you is that Kenmore was honored in 2025 as a WELL City. That's a program that we have that allows cities who are members of the trust to receive a 2% discount on your medical premiums. And 2% might not sound like a lot to you, but if you know anything about how healthcare coverage works, it can be quite expensive. And many cities have found that when they ran the numbers on that 2% savings, that equaled about a 1% property tax increase. So it's a really significant savings to the city to be a part of that program. And it also helps establish healthy workplace cultures, and it really is a beneficial program to your city staff. So we're really pleased to honor you this year as a WELL City. We have other services that we provide at AWC. We have a job board where people find jobs in the public sector, and you can post jobs within your city as a member. We do a salary and benefits survey so that you can take a look at what other people in other cities are getting paid and to compare your city staff's salaries and benefits to those. We also do a tax and user fee survey, and that helps you determine if your taxes and fees that you're charging to your residents, your taxpayers in your city, are in line with what other cities in the region and across the state are doing. And that can help you make sure that your utility rates, your taxes are fair and equitable for your residents there. We have a lot of publications. We have a lot of data and research that we do on behalf of cities. I've listed some of them here. I encourage you to really go check out our website because we have a lot of resources for you to learn some best practices as a city. Most people know us at AWC because of our advocacy work that we do in Olympia on behalf of cities. And I think you're all familiar with our city legislative priorities for 2025. I'm not going to give you a huge rundown on how the legislative session went tonight, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you might have about that. But our priorities this year were around fiscal sustainability for cities, behavioral health treatment capacity, affordable housing supply, public safety, and infrastructure investment. And it was actually a fairly decent legislative session for cities in those regards. I just wanted to make sure you all are aware of how our priorities are set. And the way that happens is through you and through other cities across the state. So every 4 years, and last year was the year we did this, we adopt a statement of policy, which is sort of like the Constitution for AWC. It talks about all the principles that will guide our legislative priorities. And then we do surveys of all the cities, and we ask them what do they need as cities and what kinds of priorities do they have. And then we have a legislative priorities committee, which are 2-year terms that serve on that. And I would encourage you all, if you're interested in that process, maybe to volunteer for the legislative priorities committee in a future year. And then we also get input from all sorts of advisory committees that we have. We have a small cities advisory committee. We have a large city advisory committee. We work with folks like the City Managers Association, which your deputy city manager is the past president of that association. So we get feedback from all sorts of different groups. We have public comment for our members to be able to provide feedback on that. And then the Legislative Priorities Committee takes all that feedback. They make some recommendations, and then the board ultimately adopts those recommendations. And because of the fact that Stephanie, your deputy city manager, serves as the past president of WCMA, the City Managers Association, she actually serves on the EWC board. So she's had a hand in determining what our legislative priorities will be over the last 2 years while she's served on that committee. So some other ways that you can stay connected with AWC, we have lots of committees at AWC. We have an education committee, we have the legislative committee. We also have appointing authority to many statewide boards and committees on a variety of topics. And so those are some great ways to get engaged with AWC. We also send out lots of emails. People often tell us, oh my gosh, well, you guys send us so many things, but we have so many things that we're doing on behalf of cities, and we want to make sure that you're aware of those. So we send out weekly City Voice emails. We have a legislative bulletin that comes out very frequently. We have a quarterly hard copy magazine. You can also follow us on social media and keep up to date about some of the things that are going on at AWC there. And then we do lots of education and training sessions, as well as in-person events. We do a mayor's exchange twice a year. We host small city connectors around the state. We have our City Action Days conference, and then we do our annual conference, which I'll talk more about in just a moment. So I hope that you would join us at our annual conference. I know that Stephanie Lukash is going to be there. I had hoped to be here tonight with you to encourage you to come to that conference, but I will share with you that it's actually sold out now. It's sold out as of last week. But if any of you want to come that are not signed up yet, let me know and maybe we'd be able to squeeze you in. We're really excited about this conference. It's going to be held in Kennewick, and we have a huge number of educational sessions that are designed to help city officials meet the needs of their communities. We have things on land use, public safety, budgeting, some hot topics like AI, how to engage with your community and have more productive public meetings, and more. So we have some keynote presentations that we're really excited about this year, including doing an economic forecast for Washington cities to help you with your budgeting in the coming year. And then, of course, it's a great place to learn from your peers and share best practices with people from all over the state, as well as to vote for your board representatives at our AWC annual meeting. And it's also a way that you can work towards your certificate of municipal leadership. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is a certificate of municipal leadership too. And so that's a program that we have at AWC, because when people do get elected to a city council, get elected as mayor, they don't necessarily need to have any particular background. They might not know anything about how city budgeting works. They might not understand how land use planning works in a municipality. They might not really understand the infrastructure needs and how people get money for infrastructure, that type of thing. And so we do tons of training, both in person and online, to help people who are elected to office really understand all those things. And so city officials can earn their certificate of municipal leadership when they take 30 hours of training in certain categories. And those include training around the legal requirements, things like your Open Public Meetings Act, Public Records Act, things like that, ethics, roles and responsibilities of elected officials versus staff, and so forth. We also have a category around budgeting and fiscal management. We have a category around infrastructure, transportation, and land use, a category for building safe, healthy, and thriving communities. That's where you might find classes around public safety and addressing homelessness, for example, and then more general classes around how to be an effective local leader. I want to say kudos to Councilmember Lutsis. He earned his certificate of municipal leadership in 2024, which I really applaud you for. Nathan, that's a great accomplishment and a really great way to be the best that you can be as an elected official. And many of our city council members here in Kenmore are well on their way to earning their certificate of municipal leadership. Would encourage you all to do that, and encourage you, Nathan, to try to get that advanced certificate of municipal leadership, which you can be the next step in your learning journey. I also want to share with you tonight another program that we're really excited about at AWC, and that is what we call WASELI, or the Washington Collaborative Elected Leaders Institute. You know, we know that right now communities are often divided. There's a lot of people who are really having a hard time working together. And so this is a program that we are doing in partnership with the Evans School at the University of Washington, as well as the Ruckelshaus Center, which is an organization really devoted to helping people work through intractable challenges. And we're doing this training to help city elected officials learn how to govern across differences, how to improve civic engagement in their community, and build trust with their residents, and really address the complicated issues that are facing our cities and towns. And so the deadline for applying has passed, but we are really hoping to get a couple of more teams engaged this year to learn that type of leadership. So if you are interested in doing that, please do let me know, follow up with me. We have some sessions coming up. They're going to be in person in Spokane and Tacoma and the Tri-Cities, as well as some online sessions. And it's a great way to develop yourself as a leader. The people who participated last year really found it to be one of the most valuable trainings that they had done as elected leaders. I also want to encourage all of you to mark your calendars for our Elected Officials Essentials training. This is a training that we do every 2 years right after municipal elections. It's really geared towards newly elected officials, so people who were just elected in November, so that they can get up to speed and get trained before they take office. And so the training includes things like open government training, how to manage public meetings, public records requests, records retention, things like Robert's Rules and ethics and the separation of powers and how power is distributed between staff and elected officials in cities, as well as an introduction to budgeting and finance. And so it's a hugely valuable training. Many of you on the council I know did it. I encourage people to do it every 2 years when we offer it, not just when they're newly elected officials, because people always learn new things. I always learn new things, and I've been doing this for about 25 years now. So it's a great course, and I want to thank you all. We host these all over the state, as well as online. And last time we did this 2 years ago in 2023, Kenmore was one of our host sites, and we really appreciated your partnership in that. And we may hit you up to do another one in 2025. I want to show you, this is what the state looks like. These are our different board of directors districts. You are in District 7, which you can see there on the map. You're represented currently on our board by Councilmember Wendy Weicker of Mercer Island. She is not running for re-election to the board this year because she is term limited. We have one person running for election from District 7 who will be elected next Thursday, and that's Angela Burney, the mayor of Redmond. But people can run from the floor if they choose to, but in all likelihood, Mayor Burney will be your new representative on the board. So encourage you to connect with her and let her know what your needs are. But you can also always reach out to me if you have anything that you need to focus on. This is hard to read probably from where you're sitting, but I'll share these slides with you as well. But this shows you a little bit more about who our board of directors are. It's mostly elected officials from all over the state, from all those different board districts. Plus we have our officers. You're really fortunate in King County because you do have several people on the board. You have District 7 and District 13 are both in the board, and as well as our one of our at-large seats on the board is held by Councilmember Ed Prince from Renton. Our board president is Mayor Amy Okerlander of Duval. So you're a little overrepresented in King County right now, I would say, on the board. And additionally, we have the WCMA, or the City Managers Association, president and past president on our board. And I want to say a big thank you to Stephanie Lukash for her service on the EWC board, where she has been serving for the past 2 years, first as WCMA president and now as WCMA past president. She's been a really engaged and great board member to work with. We really appreciate all the time and energy that she's given to the board. She's done trainings for us at our conferences, and she's just been a great thought partner to all of us. Her leadership on the EWC board is really well appreciated. So thank you, Stephanie, for your service to EWC. One of the big things that we did over the past year with the board is adopt a 2025 through 2027 strategic plan. We have goals that are centered around these areas of advocacy, communication, inform, educate, serve, and engage. We'll be giving out copies of the strategic plan at that annual conference next week, and we'll also be posting it on our website next week. So I encourage you to check that out and look at some of the things that we're going to be focusing on over the next couple of years, and give us feedback to see if that really hits the mark for what you need in Kenmore as well. So I'm going to wrap up here and open it up for questions. Have you give me feedback about how AWC can best serve Kenmore, because we're really a member-focused organization. We're here to serve you. And so if there's anything that we can be doing differently to better meet the needs of you here in Kenmore, please let me know. But I hope you will stay involved and engaged with AWC and let us know how we can better serve your needs. So I'll stop sharing here, but let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Marshall.
No questions. I just wanted to thank you for your advocacy for city's power and for local control. Thank you.
You are very welcome. Yeah, that we really do believe that cities are the level of government closest to the people, and that you all are the ones who understand best what your community needs, and that decisions should be made by the elected officials here in cities rather than being made by somebody far away in some other jurisdiction. So thank you for your service on the city council.
Any other questions? Well, Deanna, doesn't look like we have any further questions or comments, but I do. I also want to thank you on behalf of the council for your advocacy for cities throughout the state and the work AWC does to help elected public officials perform at their highest for the communities they serve. We really appreciate you taking this valuable time out of your schedule to present to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. And Stephanie, I'll look forward to seeing you at our conference next week. And if any other council members decide you have time to be there too, just let me know and I bet we can squeeze you in. So thanks for having me this evening, and I'll look forward to seeing all of you in person soon. Take care.
Yep, thank you. Oh yeah, and congratulations, Councilmember Lucis, on your certification. Almost forgot to bring that up. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the business agenda, starting with first quarter financial report presented by Finance and Administration Director Melinda Merrill.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me. I'm going to go over the Q1 information for you tonight, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at the slides. I wanted to point out that if you look at the next slide, I just want to jump ahead for a second, and you see at the bottom $198,000, basically $200,000 in the red through the quarter, but also a $3 million deficit in our budget. So I just want to remind you that's how we set the budget for the 25-26 biennium. And if you remember, part of that is attributed to the special projects line item, which you can see kind of in the middle there. And that's a $2 million budget line item that is using reserves, that was using some of those leftover ARPA dollars. And then we also decided to set aside $650,000 for Lake Point. That's going to be a transfer. And then we initially even just started the budget with a small $400,000 deficit. So all of that together makes up this $3 million deficit. So I don't want you to think, whoa, what's happening? That's actually how we set the budget to start the year. So this is kind of your first time seeing it, and I didn't want you to have sticker shock about that. But going back to the revenues, so our property taxes, as you know, are very cyclical. So right now we've only through March 31st only received some dollars, but we did get a large $1.7 million payment in April. So that kind of brings us up to where we would expect to be. And then also development fees and permits are doing well right now. We have some projects going on that are bringing in some good monies there, as well as our interest income is still holding strong. It's still maintaining around, you'll see a schedule later, but around 4% plus or minus depending on the investment. So we're doing pretty good there. Any questions on the revenue page? So expenditures, oh, and I forgot to mention that we are 3 months into the biennium, which is at 12.5% of the budget spent. So you would expect to see if everything was perfectly even, you would expect your total expenditure line at 9.8% would be around 12.5. So it's a little low. I'm going to switch back and you can see revenues is a little low at 10%. But again, that's to be expected. So much of our work and things that we do is cyclical, so it will even out over time. But some of the main things I want to mention on this expenditure report is city council along with finance. You can see those are a bit higher at 18.5 and 22.6% spent. It's because we pay for certain annual dues and fees at the beginning of the year. And so I want to make sure I say the right one. Is it AWC? It is AWC. So I thought it was AWC. I'd want to make sure. So yes, we pay AWC and Sound Cities through City Council, and then Finance pays WCIA premiums right at the start of the year. So that throws everything off, and then it evens out as time goes on. Some areas are running low, legal, surprisingly. We book some of that now in the Transportation Capital Fund, so it does show a little bit lower. But just actually those costs are lower at the start of the year for whatever reason, generally speaking. Public safety is a little low, and that's because we received our 2 invoices for February and March in April, so we didn't pay those till late, and those are just shy of $400,000. So if those were included, we would be normalized for those expenditures if they had been in there. Our special projects line, which is again, a lot of special projects. The only thing that's hitting in there right now is salaries and benefits, and most of those projects have not launched at this point. And then what else was I going to mention? I think that was it. All the other items tend to be kind of cyclical with Public Works, those costs for maintenance and events and recreation. So those will increase as we go on. So our general fund reserves, we have an expected requirement of 3.8 million, which is based on the expenditures that we are anticipating for 2025. Our actual fund balance through March 31st is 9.9 million. So everything is looking good in that, in regards to that for now. Here's the investment schedule. We have several bonds where we've put money and that have varying maturity dates to give us a lot of flexibility with those dollars, even though they're a little less flexible due to maturity dates. We have a lot of different upcoming dates. So, and then we have a lot of money in our LGIP account, and it's been, again, holding strong over 4%, which is nice. So we do monitor that carefully and make sure that we're trying to have a good balance between what we have in bonds and what we keep in LGIP. Because once LGIP goes down, it takes a long time for it to come back up. So we're trying to take advantage of the rate there while we can. In the street fund, we are pretty much on track. You can see again that total revenue line at 13.7%. Some items are up and down, but no surprises here. Everything seems to be coming along nicely. We did book one of our transfers here, so everything looks a little more in line than it has in the past. So expenditures, they're just up ever so slightly at 14.2%. You can see a deficit here, but keep in mind that when we did this budget, it also was budgeted to use some fund balance. So that's that 400,000. So as long as we don't, go excessively over 400,000, as long as we're in this range during the year, then that's to be expected. So CAPE. This is a newer sheet than, I think you saw one last year maybe, but this is a newer sheet for you guys. We definitely want to keep an eye on what's happening in CAPE. You can see that through March, we had revenues of $289,000. That's obviously low for the budget. And so the reason for that is because we just started 24-hour enforcement, and in April, just April alone, we had $335,000 that we brought in for the month of April. So it's going up, and we will be bringing on other other locations. So that will also increase those revenue dollars. The costs are a little bit low. That's fine for now. We will see program costs go up as we add those locations. And also as we have higher levels of infractions, then we get charged more too. So that those program costs will go up. And then we haven't done any of the transfers here yet. So we will wait to see how our revenues look before we do big transfers, right? Because we don't know how it's going to really turn out. Public Works Operations Center, again, a newer slide for you guys. The only revenue in this is the investment interest, and we should have booked, I should have had a budget for some investment interest in this account, but I had no idea how long it would take us to spend that money, but obviously we're sitting on a large influx of dollars there related to the bonds. And so we're going to make some good interest until we really start ramping up the costs in this account, which is nice. And then we just have mostly salaries and benefits that are going on. There's a little bit of construction that's happening, but I think you heard in a prior meeting ago a little bit more about the public works and the timing of that. And so we won't see more larger costs until towards the end of the year and then into 2026. So our surface water fund, we do bring in fees in that fund, and we are expecting $9.7 million. We've only brought in 2%, but don't fret because I'm going to make sure I give you the right number. We brought in 1.36 million in April. So of course, this is tied to our taxes that come in. So we're back on track with the April dollars that we brought in. So you will see that next quarter. And that puts us, if that was in here, we'd be at 16% of that budget number. And then the expenses are, basically on track. Again, tends to be a little bit cyclical, but that all looks good so far. Our impact fee revenue funds, larger than anticipated park impact fees, again, related to development and some of those costs that we've been receiving that were higher than we thought at the beginning of the year. And then transportation impact fees as well, large dollars coming in there. So that's a very good thing to see at this point in the year. Our REIT and TBD funds, the REIT funds are very important to come in as anticipated because those are helping to pay for the public works bonds. So we will be watching that very carefully as we go through the next year and so on. And so right now it's looking okay at the 10.6, and then transportation benefit district revenues at 11% are looking on track. So the summary of the reports that you received is that our general fund revenues are a bit below our 12.5% target, but that is due to the cyclical nature of our property tax revenue, which is our main source of revenue. Expenditures are low, and that's a variety of sources that I mentioned. Interest revenue brought in almost 100,000, so we're excited about that, still making that good amount of interest. Development fees and permits revenue came in at 21% of budget. Public safety costs low only because invoices were received late. And then all the other funds are basically tracking as we would anticipate. What questions can I answer?
Any questions for our finance director? Councilmember Lutsis.
Yes, I will start with a question, and then I have a quick comment. And this just goes back to the insurance slide, or not, excuse me, not insurance, the investment slide. Just for those folks watching, to sort of destigmatize some of that jargon, could you define what LGIP means?
Oh, local government investment pool.
Okay.
And so, yeah, and so it is an option for us to put our money in, and it's great because it's, what's the word? It's very flexible. We don't, what is the right word? I can't think of it. We're allowed to add and take it back at any time. can't think of that word, but anyway, it's, we're not tied to any maturities on it, right? So, it's basically we can put our money in there and then the next day take it out.
It's
And
pretty liquid.
it's very liquid, thank you. Couldn't think of the word. Yes, so it's extremely liquid and we're getting a better rate in there than we are on the bonds. So we actually just had a conversation today with my team about taking more, we have to leave a certain amount of money in our banking account, obviously for cash flow purposes and pay the bills and whatnot, but we've been pretty conservative, leaving more money in there than we need to. And it's like, we can get that money out of LGIP anytime. So we're going to push more money in there to try and keep getting as much as we can out of that investment rate. So we're going to watch it a lot more carefully and make sure we're always good with, you know, making sure we cover all of our debts. But yeah, so we're excited to hopefully make more investment interest.
Thank you. That's great. That was my only question, was just what does the LGIP
Yeah.
mean? But I do want to thank you. This I think is, you know, extensive. This is great. This is what I was curious about and looking for. Some of the things that we're tracking, especially depending on how the economy goes, some of the new revenue sources that we have, just making sure that we're monitoring those. So thank you very much for this. This is awesome. And, you know, sure things will kind of even out as we go along, but it's great to hear that investments are up. That's awesome. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, I just want to thank you again for a really great succinct report that stresses where we are currently relative to where we expect to be, which to me is just sort of the bottom line, and being able to explain and anticipate our questions when things look like they might not be on track, and sort of giving us some context for that. I find your reports extremely helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Well, I'd like to echo Councilmember Shrevenick and Councilmember Lutz's commendations and compliments to your good work here. Thank you.
Did it. Thanks, you guys.
Okay, next on the agenda, zoning regulation amendments for parcels adjacent to Swamp Creek near State Route 522, 80th Avenue Northeast, where interim regulations currently apply. Presented by Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Debbie Bent, and Senior Planner Brittany Chu for discussion and direction.
Good evening, Council. We do have a PowerPoint presentation this evening, which kind of summarizes the information that was in your agenda packet and the questions that we're hoping to get direction from this evening that will help staff draft amendments to bring forward to you later in the year. Just to give a little bit of background is why are we talking about interim regulations and replacing regulations? Well, it's been quite a story, it's quite a timeline. So in 2015, the city adopted transit-oriented development, or TOD regulations, along the 522 corridor. And they were adopted as an overlay so that people could develop either with the underlying zoning or with the TOD overlay. The benefits of the TOD overlay would allow more density. There's also an affordability requirement. We decided to take TOD regs up again in 2021 with the goal of incorporating that overlay into actual zoning requirements. So the Planning Commission worked on this in 2021 and 2022. And during that review, the interim regulations were put in place along the 522 corridor to sort of preclude people developing townhomes because the desire was to have higher density and also require an affordability requirement. The Planning Commission brought forward their recommendation in late 2022. There was a minority report from the Planning Commission that time with concern about protection for Swamp Creek and concern about the ecological benefits and about balancing high density with those ecological benefits. So what happened then at that point was in early 2023, I think March of 2023, the council adopted TOD regulations, which essentially incorporated those regulations into zoning, and we created a new zoning district. 13 parcels were exempted from that, and we called it the carve-out area. And those are the 13 parcels close to Swamp Creek, and the interim regulations stayed in place and have been extended periodically every 6 months. You have to have a public hearing in order to extend those regulations. And in fact, next week, we'll be coming back for a public hearing to again extend those regulations to give time for the council to consider new regulations that will then apply to those parcels. So that's why we are here today. You also asked for a Swamp Creek assessment study, and that work was completed, and those results were presented to you in September of 2024. So why, you asked, didn't we do something at the end of 2024 or now? Well, we had other work program items. So again, this is why there's a little bit of a delay, but we are getting to that, close to that finish line. So that's just to give you some history and perspective and remind you about some of the history. So I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Brittany, who's going to give the PowerPoint presentation. And then following the presentation, we're here to answer any questions and hear some direction on regulations that we can then, from your direction, bring back draft code later in the year for your consideration, and then later, even further in the year, a public hearing with adoption by the end of the year. So thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd now like to turn it over to Brittany. Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of the City Council. Community development staff are pleased to be here tonight with you to present zoning regulation amendments for parcels adjacent to Swamp Creek near SR 522 and 80th Avenue Northeast, where interim regulations currently apply. So I'll provide a brief introduction, and then we'll go through the TOD, the Swamp Creek study as well, and then get into the policy questions. So Debbie went over this history really well, but this shows a timeline. It started out in 2015 with the TOD district overlay zone adopted all the way to where we are right now in June 2025. So what is TOD? Transit-oriented development creates dense, walkable, and mixed-use spaces near transit that support vibrant, sustainable, and equitable communities. A mix of uses, activities, and services allows TOD residents to commute to work, run errands, and meet basic needs without a car. Some of the benefits of TOD are encouraging housing affordable to all economic groups, increasing pedestrian connectivity, quality design, such as having public spaces and amenities like plazas and parks, as well as quality building design are important parts of TOD, and preserving significant tree groves as well. So for the current land use, looking at the TOD area, on the west side of the TOD, there's primarily commercial properties, with the exception of one residential property on the northwest. And on the east side, we see all residential properties. So buildings on the west side are older than the east side, and so we believe those are more likely to develop sooner than those on the east side. So any new development would have to be built outside of the ordinary high watermark setback. So we see that's the orange hashing on the map. So we see that covers a large area of what could be built and potentially developed in the future on that commercial side. So the TOD has 3 sets of regulations that it follows. The first regulation is the TOD parcels. So it's the 13 parcels on the map. And then the second set of regulations that it follows is zoning. So developers choose between the TOD's regulations or the underlying zoning. And so after that, they also follow the shoreline regulations if they're within that area. So we see the Swamp Creek commercial shoreline area is on the west side of Swamp Creek, and then the Urban Conservancy is on the east side. So any buildings that fall within that buffer are also subject to those regulations from the shoreline jurisdictions. That's part of the critical area code. And that goes through SEPA, it goes through environmental review as well. And so also responding to a public comment we received earlier about the great blue heron rookeries near that area. So that's part of the critical area codes. So anything within 656 feet of a great blue heron rookery nest has that buffer. The buildings have to follow the critical area codes for that area. A habitat management plan is needed. And with it being critical areas, also the SEPA approval. In between January and July, there's no clearing allowed in that area or grading or land disturbing. So our code does have provisions to protect those nests. So with zoning and shoreline standards comparison, so looking at the different zonings that are in the TOD zone. So the residential areas, those will have the setbacks. TOD and shoreline does not have additional setbacks except for the ones within that shoreline jurisdiction area. Usually a 150-foot buffer plus an extra 15 for a building setback. And then with the height, we can see the urban corridor east and the urban residential have a greater height allowances with 85 feet compared to the residential areas. They have 60 feet. And then TOD as well is in between with 65 feet. If they're closer to Swamp Creek, they're going to be even lower with 35 feet. With density, we also see differences with the urban corridor east, urban residential, and TOD all having density between 60 to 150 dwelling units per acre. And we see less density with those residential zonings, R12, R18, and R24. And then the biggest difference as well is with affordability, with urban corridor east and urban residential zonings requiring 25% of dwelling units to be affordable, whereas a TOD zone requires 10% of those units to be affordable. So looking at the most recent example we have of TOD development in the area. So the Beechwood 2 apartments were recently approved and they began construction this year. And so doing that, the developer could choose between the R18 or the TOD standards, and they chose the TOD standards to develop. But even with that, they still have to follow some of the R18 if it's not listed within the TOD category. So they used the R18 setbacks. With TOD, they had some extra height, extra 5 feet of height, and they also had more density. And then also with impervious surface area, they followed R18. Because they were within the urban conservancy zone, most of the parcel was outside of that, but the portion that was within that still has to follow those shoreline jurisdictions. And then because they chose TOD, they also had to do 10% affordable units. So looking at the history of Swamp Creek. So these are aerial images from 1938, 1964, and 1977. So looking at the first image in 1938, we can see the outline of Swamp Creek and what it looks like. We don't see tree coverage in this area, so we can see the creek more clearly. Then in 1964, we see more tree coverage. We also see the development of buildings. We see the bowling lanes, and we see the streets and roads are becoming more developed. And then in 1977, we see even more development of the area. So this represents the urban growth happening in Kenmore and in the region as we see these developments continue to grow, as well as the preservation that we see in the tree coverage there in Swamp Creek. So the Swamp Creek study was done just last year in 2024. So Osborne Consulting with Kenmore looked at 155 parcels, 13 of those within the TOD zone, the rest outside of that. And then they evaluated that based on development and environmental criteria. Then they scored those based on potential for ecological restoration. So the dark brown parcel just north, adjacent to the TOD boundary area, has the highest prioritization score. So it has highest priority for ecological restoration. Then the parcels that are in between, the yellow-brown color within the TOD area, So there's 3 on the west side and then 3 on the east side as well. Those have a medium priority for ecological restoration. And then the lighter yellow, brown color has low prioritization. So based on that, we'll go through some of these policy questions. So looking at the parcels with residential zoning, so those are going to be all primarily on the east side and then 1 on the west side. So should the current residential zoning with the TOD option be retained? And should any amendments be considered? So here we're looking at if we want to keep things the way they are now with the interim regulations where developers can choose whether they do TOD or they develop with the underlying zoning. And then the second question, should the zoning be changed to urban residential for those residential zonings, or should any amendments to the urban residential zone be considered? So this is based on looking across the street from 80th Avenue Northeast. Those parcels in pink are urban residential, as well as some of the ones further west of the TOD zone. So I'm looking at those differences, and is it worth considering that area to be rezoned to urban residential? And the last question has to do with Swamp Creek. So thinking about all of that, we also want to think about which parcels should be prioritized for environmental preservation, ecological restoration, as well as the TOD balancing those needs. So whenever we look at that, the 3 regulations that have the biggest differences are going to be height, density, and affordability. So comparing the zones in the residential zones, R12, R18, R24 on the east side, and then an R18 parcel on the west side. And then looking at that, so looking at that on the table, so we see based on the height, those have a lower height requirement or limit of 60 feet compared to if they were to be urban residential, it'd be a higher height of 85 feet. So right now a developer could choose, they'll either have the 60 feet or the 65 feet as the recent development did. If it were urban residential, it'd be higher than that. And then whenever we look at density, we can also see big differences there with the R12 through R24 having lower densities compared to urban residential and TOD. And with affordability, both urban residential and TOD, urban residential has a 25% affordability requirement and TOD has a 10% requirement. So that would also change that. And then R12 through R24 do not have an affordability requirement. So whenever we look at these things, we want to also think about how much we want to prioritize environmental preservation compared to economic development and balancing that out. So if we want to preserve the environment of those parcels, increasing the setbacks can help with that. Sometimes decreasing height, just depending on how significant the changes. Decreasing density and decreasing impervious surface can also help in protecting the environment. And whenever we look at economic development, we see if we want a greater buildable area, lowering the setbacks can help. Increasing height, if it's significant, increasing density, and increasing impervious surface. And then going to the second part of the questions, I'm looking at the urban corridor east zoning with the option to comply with the TOD regulations. So should the current urban corridor east zoning with the TOD option be retained? And should any amendments to the current zoning regulations be considered? So we're looking at if we want to continue that urban corridor east zoning or change it to a different zoning or change the amendments. And then looking at those same commercial parcels, should the zoning be changed or should any amendments be considered, considering our zoning map? And then based on Swamp Creek, should any amendments to the proposed zoning regulations be considered based on the results of the Swamp Creek assessment study? So we want to make sure we're using this data and from the study that we got. And we're looking at the same thing when those buildings were developed, when they were built, and then comparing urban corridor east to TOD. So we see that the height is 85 feet compared to TOD 65 feet. The density is the same for both of those. And then the affordability is also different with urban corridor east having 25% and then TOD having 10%. So we thank you all for your time, and we give it back to you, Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Thank you, Brittany and Debbie. Any questions? Councilmember Culver.
Thank you. Given that this is sort of prompted from a minority report from the Planning Commission, I don't remember seeing this on the docket, so I wondered, is this going before the Planning Commission, or is that something that we could will into existence?
This is not going to the Planning Commission because it does not involve an amendment to the comprehensive plan. So this is part of the council's work program.
Okay, maybe we can find some other way to get some feedback from them. I would definitely want to hear what they think about this. I guess offhand, I have a information question too. Like, do we have any ballpark estimate of what our, let's call it creek or swamp or whatever sort of coastline, shoreline to use that word, what the ratio is of that in our city versus areas that aren't that? It's, I presume, a comparatively rare thing, right? The swamp and the shoreline is sort of more the exception than the rule, right?
I'm not clear on the question. So are you asking me how many parcels have shoreline regulations applicable?
Or even just like by like square mileage or anything like that. Like it's comparatively smaller, right?
I want to say that there is just under 7 miles of shoreline, which includes Swamp Creek, the Sammamish River, and shoreline around Lake Washington, but I can verify that mileage number. I don't know how many parcels off the top of my head.
Sure.
Is that applies to.
Right. Okay. I guess I would just say, like, I'm not ready to get in the weeds on policy questions, but like, given that it seems comparatively rare to me, I think I would definitely lean much more strongly toward preservation of them. We have a lot of land that we can put toward other things. So yeah, I will stop there. Thank you.
I'd just like to kind of say that the shoreline regulations and the critical area regulations and shoreline regulations, the shoreline regulations apply within that shoreline jurisdiction. And those are, we have to be approved by the Department of Ecology. They were adopted in 2019, and a periodic update requires those to be updated every 10 years. So it'd be 2029 is the deadline to have those adopted. So we would likely be starting work on those in 2027 and 2028. We're not proposing as part of this work program item to amend shoreline regulations or critical area regulations. We are focusing on more of those typical zoning regulations, height, density, setbacks, etc.
Councilmember Sassen.
Thank you so much. I need clarity on our expectations of the council this evening. So what I'm understanding is that this is on our agenda for discussion and direction. And does that mean that you would like the council to answer the 3 questions that were identified?
I would at
this
least like
session?
to have some discussion about, again, whether you want to keep the current situation as it is. So in other words, you could have zoning with an overlay, or do you want to incorporate, like we did elsewhere, rather than having an overlay, incorporate those into actual zoning requirements? And then the third question would be, if you decide to incorporate them, which kind of zoning regulations do you want? Is it the urban corridor or the urban residential or some mix of those? So we're just kind of trying to get a feel for this point, the approach. And then based on the approach, what are some of the modifications that you would like to make? And Brittany, in a staff report, did a great job of outlining how all those regulations interplay, the differences between the zoning regulations that are currently there, the urban corridor, the urban residential, and how those interact with the shoreline regs. So again, what we're looking for is essentially an approach. And if there's anything specific that council, wish to amend, that we'll take that into consideration. We're not expecting a final decision tonight, just some basic direction that we can then use to start drafting regulations.
Sure, I just want to add that to me, this presentation was fabulous, but it was a whole lot like drinking
It's
from
a
a fire
lot.
hose.
It's a lot, and I
yeah.
understand that it's a lot, and you will have a lot of questions, and understand that we might need to come back for sort of a second stab at this before we bring back draft regulation,
Yeah.
because it is a lot to take in. I understand that.
For that reason, I do feel sympathetic to Councilmember Culver's, did the planning commission weigh in? Does staff have recommendations? Because honestly, I could pull out pieces, but it was so much information all at once. I feel a little at a loss for where to begin to answer the question. So I guess we'll see what the rest of us have to say.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
I had a similar feeling after reading this to my fellow council members, even though I had served a bunch of years on the planning commission. It is a lot, and it would be helpful to maybe just sort of slowly walk us through maybe the first policy question and maybe some pros and cons of different approaches slowly. And then I did have a clarifying question. So the shoreline piece, I'm just looking here, 60 feet and the 150 and 50 feet and 100 feet for the water-oriented uses, et cetera. Those apply because they're not listed in the other residential zones in the UC and the urban residential, they apply, correct? I mean, you have to comply with those, or is that correct?
Yes, so if
Okay.
you are adjacent to the shoreline, within the shoreline jurisdiction, which is 200 feet, and then the shoreline rules then apply. So
Yeah,
the
okay.
rules of the shoreline then kind of dictate the setback from Swamp Creek
Right, right,
in
right.
those two shoreline zones.
And correct me if I'm wrong, so this was brought to us and I couldn't frankly remember all the nuance of the minority report, so that might be something to refresh our memories with. But I mean, it was, what I do remember, it was a general concern about encroachment and the impact on, obviously the Swamp Creek. But what I don't remember is if they had a specific concern. For example, was it that development too close, in other words, setbacks, would be detrimental? I feel like that was the central concern, was around setbacks, but I'm not remembering. So that would be helpful. Thank you.
I think the concern was sort of how you could restore some of the ecological benefits of Swamp Creek, whether that's setbacks or the opportunity for restoration. So the purpose of the shoreline corridor assessment done by Osborne was to take a look at some of those factors, and that they came up with several factors, and then the report then summarized that into those parcels which had greater opportunity for restoration than not. So the point then is that, looking at this, and this applied to the entire Swamp Creek corridor, but now we're just focusing on those 13 parcels. This was sort of Osborne's results, based on multiple criteria. There is a link, I believe, in the agenda packet to that assessment, so you can kind of see how that all worked.
Just a final question that may be a little outside the box, but I mean, is there any opportunity along here, along this area for, conservation easements or, purchase of partial property, sort of like we've done elsewhere in the city, where we've looked at potential ecological benefit and we've kind of, taken action, but that it doesn't preclude the rest of the parcel from being developed at the kind of highest and best use.
There is always the opportunity to do that. That would probably be something that would be more voluntary if the property owner was willing. and if that was a priority. You know, Swamp Creek extends very far, and the city has purchased several parcels from willing property owners. And again, I think we would use this study to sort of take a look at where you would get, you know, most bang for your buck for property purchase. But there is, you know, if a property owner was willing, the city could work with the property owner, but would have to compensate the property owner for that property. So we wouldn't be condemning property.
Right.
But
No,
it's
I was
always an
just thinking
option.
part of the, you know, the extending the corridor a little bit. Thank you.
Councilmember Lutsis.
Yeah, I've had a similar thought as Councilmember Srebnick. I mean, I know that looking at our zoning maps further up Swamp Creek, there are parcels in which portion of it is, you know, designated as one, and then closer to the 73rd is, you know, zoned a little bit differently. Just in that sort of situation, so I don't think it's impossible, and I think that would be preferable in a lot of different ways. But sort of moving to a couple of my questions, I'll start just with this map here regarding the assessment study and some of the questions around, you know, how should we incorporate this? A concern of mine is sort of at what point does it become spot zoning if we're looking at specific parcels and we only want to pick out these few parcels? Or are we just not in danger of that now that we have a study to sort of back us up?
I don't think we would be, it's spot zoning. I think that the purpose of the study is to sort of look at parcels that may have greater potential for ecological restoration. So it's not rezoning, and we wouldn't be rezoning each parcel differently for those 13 parcels. There has to be some rationale and consistency. It's just a tool when the city is looking at opportunities for restoration. So if a parcel developed and it was a high priority, again, we could voluntarily work with the property owner, or if the city wanted to purchase it, you know, like other parcels where there's a willing seller, we could do that too. But it's not, I wouldn't call that spot zoning.
Okay, but it just, I guess, in considering some of the policy questions proposed, is you're not sort of asking us if there's particular parcels or a threshold based on this prioritization score?
No.
Okay, to sort of give direction around that. All right, thank you. The other question I had, just, you know, for my own curiosity as we were going through this evening that popped up, was, I don't know how well you're going to be able to answer this, so that's okay. You can say no, or that you don't have the information. But when it comes to the existing status quo, how often, or is there a strong likelihood of developers potentially using reasonable use exemptions with some of these shoreline buffers?
Reasonable use exception is typically applied when your entire parcel is impacted by critical areas. And usually a reasonable use is one single-family home.
Okay, so none of these would be sort of subject to that. I do see a couple of parcels which they're almost entirely covered by shoreline buffers.
Again, if there was a specific parcel, the data on critical areas is general, and you only get into the details of where the actual buffers are when you have a specific development, and the study is done to actually define and survey where those are. So they may or may not be entirely impacted. But again, if they are entirely impacted, their reasonable use typically means you apply for reasonable use, and it's typically one single family home. That's kind of what case law has supported.
All right, thank you.
If I can add to that as well, Debbie. Yes, I think so. Most of these are either townhomes or apartments that are residential. There is one that is a single family home, but in terms of the buffer, at least what's on the map is 200 feet. And in terms of like developable area, there needs to be at least 165 feet. So I think we may have to take a closer look at that parcel to see like where that 165 foot would lie with that. So I'm not entirely sure if it is within it or not, but we can check on that.
Councilmember Marshall.
I hope this gives some direction. I do want to see the results of the Osborne study incorporated into proposed regulations. I think it'd be great to prioritize where we can help the stream the most. Also, to retain, of course, the Swamp Creek carve out and to maximize ecological values in that zone for setbacks and less height. And I think to retain the east zone as it is, and then for the rest of the area and further west to see what we can do to encourage or maximize density without with a height that is similar, and I'm sorry, I don't know it right now, but the height that's similar to the height of the buildings that we're looking at mainly right here, which is what, 50, 65 feet? Yeah, something like that. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Lutsis.
I meant to actually respond to my colleague, Councilmember Sassen. When the Planning Commission did look at this entirely in TOD, and it was because of the minority report that this small section was pulled out. But it was something that, speaking, having served on the Planning Commission at that time, that we did look at and did try and work through, and is there a way that we can carve this out or something like that? But I just wanted to let you know that at the time the Planning Commission had looked at all this, that this wasn't something foreign. But I mean, I also understand that circumstances have changed now that there's some new information, some data. So, but I just wanted to address that and say that it was, this area was looked at.
Councilmember Sassen.
Okay, I wonder if it's possible for us to take these policy questions one at a time and just sort of have you, Ms. Bent, weigh in for us about what the pros and cons are. Because I, for one, am really unclear about what urban residential zoning means. We're going to make a change to urban residential. I don't know what that means. I apologize.
No, I realize it's a lot of information. I would say that probably the table which kind of shows that comparison is, and I understand that's a little bit small up there, but that kind of outlines the zoning regulations and the differences between the zones in terms of setbacks, height, etc. So that is probably the best thing to look at.
Councilmember Sassen, were you asking to go over that right now? I did have some comments that I wanted to bring forward before we go a little deeper, personally. So I actually recall how this came about it was something that when it was first presented to the Planning Commission, I recall we as council brought up, what is it that we can do to ensure maximum environmental benefit as we are looking at the TOD overlay and look at, although as we can see here, we have buildings built into zones that would be protected today. What is best in the long term, not only for housing and development, but for the environment, especially being on a very important creek. So that I really recall that at the root of this, and even before the minority report that came forward, we had asked the Planning Commission to look at what we can do as a council to preserve that area. So as a council, I think our questions are, as I'm looking at the tables, there are questions that are being asked that are pretty clear as far as direction. Environmental preservation or economic development, what sort of direction do we want along those things? And we can go through these policy questions. I'm going to say, I agree with several of our council members that this was really important work, but it's a lot for us to make big decisions on today, as sometimes we've been working on this for a couple of years. We know what our intentions are, but the level of detail that we could potentially want to get into, I think might be a lot for us to do this evening. I would like to ask, was my question or my understanding, looking at the levers for zoning and development, environmental preservation focus versus economic development focus, the sort of direction that you're looking for us today?
Yes.
Okay. Would we like to, as a council, go through that right now? Okay, Councilmember Culver.
Yeah, I'd be a little reluctant about getting like super in the weeds. I've already kind of shown my hand on which, that's a two-sided continuum, but I'd be a little reluctant on just getting super in the weeds just because of time and without Mayor Herbeck here. But so I might consider suggesting that we table until a future date. I guess I'd be curious how others might feel about that, just to give us more time to potentially let planning commission folks like weigh in on this and come comment or whatever. The room's empty. So this is rad. There's a ton of information here. Honestly, it just means like I got to spend more time with this to sort of absorb it, but I just thought I would throw that out there.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
I'd like to walk through at least a couple of these, because even if we do table the discussion, it'd be helpful to make sure we're all on the same page of like, what's the information we should be looking at for this policy question? And then what's the information for the next, just kind of being really deliberate about making sure we're all on the same page. Maybe I'm the only one that feels that way, but it seemed like there were maybe some other folks that could be beneficial.
And may I ask again, where I'm comfortable just sharing with council would be high-level policy questions, but as far as, and I have a feeling across the board, we almost could do a thumbs up, thumbs down on each of them related to environmental versus economic development focus. Would that meet our needs for today for you, for staff to walk away? In that direction.
Well, let me see where we get, and I reserve judgment.
Okay. So
Bless you all.
shall we start with policy question number 1? And that's parcels with 1A. So parcels with residential zoning with the option to comply with TOD overlay regulations. Should the current residential zoning with the TOD option be retained? Should any amendments to current zoning regulations be considered? And my question is, if so, how, right? Councilmember Shrevenick, then Councilmember Lutsis.
And so just to be still clear. So for this question, we should be looking at that policy question 1 table that has the yellow for R12, 18, and 24. Is that correct? And then, yeah, that one.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And so you're asking us whether we should keep them optional, like an option for developers, which is what happened with Beechwood, and we got a great result, or arguably a good result. Or should we integrate, should we take the TOD reg set and use it instead of okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I understand. And so that is the extent of policy question 1A. TOD and residential are 12, 18, and 24, right?
Right.
Cool. I like TOD.
Okay. And then Councilmember Lutsis.
Yeah, one of the things that stuck out to me specifically, that's one of the reasons why I think that it makes more sense to change from the residential to the overlay zone to permanent TOD is looking at the minimum street setback. One thing that stuck out to me was the 10 feet from SR 522 and then 0 feet from other streets. So when looking at 80th, trying to get those buildings as close to the street as possible to leave a little more buffer room, I think, from some of these critical areas. I think we've had some other instances come before us where developments, that 5-10 feet can make a difference. So if we can minimize that, getting some of these structures closer to the street, if that means getting them away from Swamp Creek, then I'm certainly in favor of that. So that's part of the reason why I'd certainly be in favor of amending to make the overlay zone now the permanent zone.
Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Stassen?
I just need you to tell me again, in the boxes where the TOD is empty, it bumps over to urban residential? So in the minimum street setback, TOD has the box is empty. So what is that?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question. Yeah, so with that, so TOD does not specify like every single regulation, such as setbacks. So in those cases, it will go to the underlying zone. So if it's R18, it'll use the R18 setbacks. If it's R24, so with the Beechwood 2 apartments example, here they use the R18 setbacks. So even though they chose the TOD zoning, because our TOD regulations, they don't specify setbacks, they'll go with the underlying zoning's setbacks of R18.
So looking at the chart, not the chart that you're looking at up here, but the question 1 chart with the yellow highlighting, the overlay zone under TOD is empty, which means that depending on whether we're talking about R12, 18, or 24, although it's all 10 feet. So that empty box means that if we choose TOD, it reverts to 10 feet. Is that what we're saying?
Correct, but with Commissioner Lutzis mentioning that with urban residential, it's 10 feet on SR 522. Oh, sorry. But then it's 0 feet, a 0-foot setback from the other streets. So on 80th Avenue, those buildings can be right up to that property line.
But then that's another question, which was, do we switch to urban residential? That seems like that's a separate question. Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lutzis?
Actually, I think our discussion about switching to urban residential or not sort of addresses, I was assuming that when I was discussing TOD overlay, and I don't know, maybe if it makes more sense to just specify that in the TOD column or not, but in terms of the minimum street setback, because it is blank rather than just going to underlying, just adopting the urban residential for that one. But anyways, that's a question that we might get to a little bit later is whether or not to change the underlying zoning to urban residential.
Councilmember Shrevenick?
And remind me, and I'm sure the footnote is there somewhere, but for R18 and R24, for base max density, excuse me, I'm sorry, maximum height, excuse me. There's a 60-foot and an 80-foot with a footnote. Can you just remind us what that is?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question. Yeah, the base density, so 60 feet would be that regular height limit. But in 80 feet, the footnote would be, it relates to the transfer of density credits. So then, let's see, sorry. Yeah, so this one will only apply in R18 and R24 zones using residential density incentives or transfer of density credits in order to get to the 80-foot height.
I don't see any other questions, but there's something I don't want to say out loud, but I think it needs to be said. Yeah, or I'm just going, that 80-foot is a decision that we already made, right? About those density credits. It's not something that I just lean towards personally lower heights So I think we've already made that decision on the credits for the 80 feet, but I mean, we are looking at some really important, this is a really important zoning decision. So I'm glad we're walking through this. I am erring on the highest, most environmental preservation end of what comes back to us is where I'm leaning. So I'm not sure. It's good that we're going through this as we are. Councilmember Shrevenick.
Sorry, this is like layers of an onion. So would we be to that point, if we say we love the TOD and we want to use it instead, would we be giving up that 80 feet piece? Does that make any sense? The base maximum height that we were just talking about with the footnote. If we go with TOD, it's 65 feet.
Right.
So that would be it. There would be no PD transfer density bonus to get to 80. Is that correct? Or can we mix and match? Or, I mean, I'm just trying to figure this out.
Yes, yes, and yes. But I think if you're going to change the zoning, it's better to have it be consistent. So I would not suggest that you mix and match within 13 parcels. I would suggest that whatever rules you came up with were either consistent on the west side and the east side, but you were not cherry picking one or two parcels. So.
Yeah, no, I'm not cherry picking one or two parcels. I'm just, I thought the question was, do we want to substitute those 4 explicitly yellow TOD pieces for the 4 explicitly yellow lines in the R12, 18, and 24? I thought that's the question we were on.
Right. So I think the question is, you can either keep the current scenario, which is you have the underlying zoning you can develop under, or you can develop under the TOD regs. You can pick. Or you can go, you can just establish regulations as a TOD zone. You can create an interim zone, or you can use the zoning regulations from urban residential or urban corridor. And you can tweak those. So I think those were the way the policy questions were laid out to you. And maybe we gave you too many policy questions to consider. I'm feeling that. And I'm trying to think of a way that will help you get to an answer. I think the table above that Brittany's showing on the screen there is kind of showing in a very simplified way how these regulations either relate to environmental protection and economic development. So that's sort of one way, I think, Deputy Mayor, you were asking which ones were more in favor of environmental preservation. But again, remembering that we are trying to balance this because these are properties adjacent to the high capacity transit corridor. So it is a balance that we are trying to create.
Debbie, is it possible if we were to, I'm presenting this as so if we were to say, as a council, thumbs up, thumbs down, towards one side or the other per question, just really high level, we'll look at this, but we're saying we have a choice as you come back to us for the next presentation, because I personally have I think we will need another presentation on this because this is so rich, as you already acknowledged, and I've heard several people. I think we need to look at each of these questions, but look at it from when you come back, I'm asking a question, with recommendations based on the council's determination of policy question 1. present with environmental preservation as the priority for these decisions or economic development on what we decide. Would that be helpful to get through this today?
It would give us some direction at least to come back maybe with some pros and cons. Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Shrevenick. And followed, Councilmember, who was, I called Shrevenick, so we'll just go in order. Culver second. Thank you.
So taking policy, I think I'm getting this now. Taking policy question 1A, B, and C, you're asking us if we want to substitute either the TOD set for the R12, 18, and 24, or, right, the urban residential for the R12, 18, and 24. And if we do either of those or none of those, do we want any amendments? So that's kind of C is kind of a catch-all. And I just want to say that the urban residential, and maybe this is where Councilmember Lucis was going, seems to be a really nice balance between kind of, you know, getting us some good density and affordability while retaining, you know, all the same protections. So I don't know that, except maybe a 5% difference in impervious surface. I do see that now. That is one difference. But otherwise, it gets us some good balance.
Councilmember Culver.
I was just thinking back to the Salmon Recovery where we had like the 4 options of like go with the stream, rapid progress plus just real preschool stuff almost. And I mean that as an insult to myself more than anybody. I know how I would vote. That may be a helpful tool for us to talk about some of these things. I'm going to stop there. I will just throw that out there. Thank you.
Councilmember Lutzis.
Yeah, just to address Councilmember Shrevenick's point, that's kind of where I was leaning was the adoption of underlying zone of urban residential, but with the applied overlay of the TOD zone. So maintaining the 10 feet setback, minimum setback from SR 522, the 0 feet for all other streets, 5 feet, the 65 feet for base maximum height, 60 dwelling units, 150 dwelling units for the maximum. And then actually I'm open to a conversation on affordability, but that's just my opinion.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, to further complicate it, I would like to see affordability maintained at the 25% where possible. So that might sway me somewhat in favor of keeping it optional and leaving it up to the developer. But to encourage greater affordability, if that's a vast difference between 10 and 25%.
Councilmember Lutzis.
Well, just to address your point, Councilmember Marshall, I'm even open to just discussing changing the overlay zone from 10 to 25 and go with that. And then I think that combines both affordability with certain environmental considerations. I think the 65 feet base maximum height, you know, is on the lower end of the height. There's still an opportunity for density to meet housing needs at that 25% affordability level. And then with that option of that possibilities of a 0 foot minimum street setback in order to allow developers to push to the street and away from the critical areas.
Councilmember Marshall.
And on that, Debbie, is that correct? Not to doubt Councilmember Lutzis, but if you get closer or less of a setback, then like I said, on the closer to 80th, would that allow practically then for more space buffer from the creek?
Yes, because obviously if you build close to the street, then you gain 10 feet. So, which would then put you 10 feet further from the creek, closer to the street.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
And do we have any sense from real developers whether if we go with the 65 maximum height and a 25% affordability, even with zero setback, is that remotely feasible? I'd be curious about that. And is 65, is it that magic? Is it 5/1 that's the maximum, or is it 6/1 that's the maximum sub-steel? You know, there's a point at which the next level, you have to go to steel, and that was always the problem for developers is I think originally we were not quite high enough to maximize the non-steel construction. And what I'm not remembering is it 5/1 or 6/1? And what is 65 feet relative to that? I'm guessing that's 5/1, 65 feet.
Yes, I think that's correct. I'll have to check with Samantha on building code requirements for types of construction, because I don't know if there's been any recent changes on that, but I can check.
Yeah, because that was, I remember that vividly from our panel of developers, is that was a key thing that they needed to actually get us the kind of density that we wanted. So I'd hate to erode that, because we were caught. That's why we did the moratorium, because we kept getting the kind of development proposals that was not what we were looking for. They were not high density.
Councilmember Culver.
I'm wondering the best way to tackle this to get everybody the information and time to chew on this and stuff. So I'd be curious if like a month and some one-on-ones might be enough, and I might make a motion if so. I'm seeing some nodding heads. I will move to postpone to a date certain. I would propose July 14th and would kindly ask for a second.
Clerk? Or
July 14th is the town hall, so just want to
Not
remind
boo.
you of that.
Yay, civic engagement. 21st? I can keep looking.
I see our deputy city clerk with their hand up.
Would council be willing to let staff look at our agenda forecast and get back to you based off of our availability?
I love that. Yes. Let's make it a doodle. Yes. Well, then the only question for the city attorney, do we need a motion, or is that just, that's understood?
I'm sorry, was there a second? You may not have a motion. To postpone, so the motion was postponed to the 14th, but you have a conflict. And so if there was not a second, you could have no motion and then just do a consensus direction.
Perfect.
Okay, did we just have a second on that? No, okay. So do we have consensus to bring this back to as a future agenda item? I see our clerk.
I can have Debbie correct me, but this is coming back on July 28th, according to our agenda forecast.
It is, but it was assuming that we would get some direction for what to bring back. I think what I've heard so far, which is individual kind of comments, but to summarize, I've heard that environmental protection is important. I've heard a few things that about urban residential seems to be the way to go. Councilmember Lutsis and Councilmember Srebnick with some kind of tweaks to that. So maybe we can kind of start there and bring back a proposal based on the comments that we've heard this evening. Because I think if you had a proposal to review, might give you something to say, no, that's not what it wants, rather than trying to kind of formulate a way to go. So if that's something that you're interested in, we can work on a proposal based on urban residential and the comments heard, and then you can kind of say yes, no, and we can tweak that when we come back on the 28th. Would that work for you?
Councilmember Sassen, do you still have a question?
I do. Can I just ask a couple more questions about the
Sure.
urban residential to be setting off with before I let you go? Can you, I'm pretty sure that Councilmember Srebnick was alluding to this, but I need clarity on how many stories is 85 feet? How many stories is 65 feet? How many layers are we talking about with those building heights?
Okay. I think generally it's 10 feet for a story. So again, you'd probably get 65, you could probably get 6 stories, and 85, you'd probably get 8 stories.
Okay.
I think the building over here, the Spencer building over here, I believe is 70 feet for some perspective.
Okay, and height is from ground level, so if there's underground parking, that is not included?
No, it's not. So I will verify how height is calculated, and I'll also kind of, in the memo, we can sort of put in some examples of known buildings. So we'll confirm,
be
for
very
example,
helpful.
the building height at Spencer, or maybe the storage building or something, so that you can at least kind of imagine then what that height looks like.
That sounds very helpful to me. And then I also just also very much want to weigh in on maintaining the 25% affordability. And I'm also, I'm also open to shifting the maximum impervious surface down towards 85%. Understanding that that likely means we will have to go with a taller building. So in my mind, it is more environmentally friendly to go high with less impervious surface than it is to spread out with more impervious surface and a lower building. So that's my thinking in that particular category. And I too feel like it's starting to come into focus that the urban residential is looking like that column is holding what we that play with. So I appreciate you coming back to us with that.
Councilmember Srebnick, followed by Councilmember Marshall, followed by me.
Yeah, thank you for developing that path forward. I would, and I think a couple of us, Councilmember Culver alluded to this too, at minimum invite folks from the Planning Commission to let us know their thoughts. They don't have to formally do it as a body, but, you know, kind of giving them a heads up that this is what we're now talking about. And if they have thoughts, that they can email us or come to public comment. I think that would be very helpful, because we're doing this based on their minority report. So, and I definitely, I really like that 25% affordability, and at the same time, I don't want to squelch development. So I really do feel like we need to kind of ground truth this to make sure we will get development at all. Yeah.
Councilmember Marshall.
Is the council okay with us directing staff tonight to come back with those Osborne Swamp Creek study result proposals? Cool, okay. I mean, proposals based on that is what I'm talking about.
It looks like we have consensus for that. And then I think I love the idea of 25% affordability. I think development matters. And if we want this, in the events that we want the housing, I think it's important for us to just have an understanding if that would have an impact on development of that property. I have a question about setbacks, and I'll ask that, and then I will kind of share what I'm seeing too. So setbacks, would that mean that the building is built to the sidewalk? If there is a sidewalk, like, you know, that's the line of where it's built, like, so on the street side, not the back, the building comes completely to the side of the road or sidewalk? or some space between, I'm just picturing in my head, I'm sorry for doing this on the fly here.
No
Because
problem.
I could see a setback being different things, and I think I know what it is. I'm not a fan of zero setbacks, but I hear consensus for it here, leaning towards the zero setbacks, but I have a concern. I just think buildings feel better and communities feel better if there is a bit of a setback.
If there is a sidewalk required, then it would be built to the back of the sidewalk, which is where the property line would be.
Okay, that clearly answered what I was asking. Thank you. And I do want to just, I see the difference between east and west side and making decisions on how we proceed on those overall. And my leaning, and I remember at the root of this, was what is best for Swamp Creek more than housing. And that's really why this was returned. So that is still on my mind. What is it that we do to get the most preservation of the land that is in the urban conservancy areas and the Swamp Creek commercial areas, if I'm reading this correctly. So I lean towards less is more and more restrictive on everything here. So as environmentally sensitive as possible, housing can go other places potentially, if need be. So I just wanted to call attention to my perspective on that so that it's heard, because that is actually what was at the very root of why this came back as a minority report to review. What is it that we can do that's best for this area? And as we look, I'm just sharing this, the more trees and environmental protection that we put into this place, the beauty and the investment in that lives on. And we do need to be looking at areas for density. I understand why there's some appeal here, but as I'm looking at the map, making sure that we are pulling as far away from that and building on underutilized parking lots and concrete is where I'd like us as a city to be truly focusing. So I know we've spent a lot of time here, but I just wanted to share at the root of this is something like the grocery outlet was built too close to the creek. We don't want to continue doing anything like that. And anything that we can recover in that zone in the long run through our decisions is something I know that we as a council and our community would like to see. We have other questions on the topic for this evening, and I see a Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, that actually raised a question for me. So we do have currently non-compliant buildings there. So because they were built before we had the regulations, I understand that. So if there is redevelopment, they're not, I mean, confirm, I guess, that they wouldn't be somehow grandfathered in because there's already a footprint that encroaches on the buffer, right?
If it was completely redeveloped, it would have to comply with the regulations. The question comes if it's modified in some way. So you're allowed to expand a nonconformity a certain percentage.
Okay.
So that there's, again,
It's a gray area.
It's a kind of a gray area depending on what's going on. But if they completely knocked the building down and they wanted to redevelop, then they would have to comply with the regulations that were in effect at the time.
Thank you. Debbie, do you have what you need for this evening?
I have some direction, and we'll do our best to bring things back, and we might sort of caveat that when we bring it back in terms of questions. So we'll bring back a recommendation, and if we have questions about the recommendation we're bringing forward, then I think it'll be easier for council to respond to something than asking you to answer these policy questions. But I think I've heard the comments enough to understand where you're coming from and what you'd like to see. And we will get answers to some of those specific questions, whether it's the number of stories in the building code. So Brittany and I have taken some good notes, and we'll come back. I believe it's on the 28th. So we will then have to sort of figure out the timeline going forward. From that, we'll have to shift a little bit. But again, thank you. Thank you for your comments and questions. And again, appreciate Brittany's hard work and doing all the research and putting together such an excellent report.
Well, thank you for being here for our deep questions this
course.
evening, and actually for being so prepared. It turned out to be a lot more than just a quick and easy discussion that it may have been. So, I could see how anyway, thank you. You've done great. Have a good
you.
evening, and thank you. Oh, yes. Since it is 9:30, we will take a break for a 5-minute break and return at 9:35. No objections. We're returning from recess. Okay, next on the agenda, Chinook Salmon Conservation Planning and Water Resource Inventory Area, RIA 8. Interlocal Agreement Renewal presented by Environmental Services Director Richard Sawyer for discussion and approval. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Good evening. So I am here this evening as the city's staff representative to RIA 8 and on behalf of the city's delegate to RIA 8 Salmon Recovery Council, Deputy Mayor O'Kane, to request council's authorization of this interlocal agreement to continue participation as a voting member of the RIA 8 Salmon Recovery Council. The current interlocal agreement expires at the end of this year, and the new ILA will go from 2026 through 2035. And as I just mentioned, Deputy Mayor O'Kane is the city's delegate to the Salmon Recovery Council, and Councilmember Culver is the city's alternate. So I've just got about a dozen slides to go through and just wanted to basically provide council some context as you consider this ILA. And I'll briefly go through, just provide some context on what the salmon recovery in the region looks like, what RIA 8's role is in that, provide an overview of the ILA, and then kind of talk about what's coming next. So salmon recovery in the region, especially in RIA 8, really took off when in 1999, the Chinook salmon was listed as threatened. And you can see in this graph provided by RIA 8 that over the years, there's been a very steep decline in the Chinook salmon populations, particularly in those that RIA 8 is working on in the Lake Washington, Sammamish, and Cedar watersheds. So shortly after it was listed in 2000, the Salmon Recovery Council was formed, and they had developed their first plan in 2005. And they formed in 2005, formulated their plan in 2007, and then we've had one major update, which was in 2017. And statewide, there's, a variety of salmon populations in different regions. And in the Puget Sound region, we're broken up into basically 15 lead entities, of which RIA 8 is one of those. And that RIA 8 region includes the, as I just mentioned, the Lake Washington watershed, Cedar River, and Sammamish River watersheds. And here's a map showing the geographical distribution of RIA 8. And it's about 692 square miles. And the ILA being proposed would include 29 local governments, of which Kenmore would be one of those. So in the plan that is developed and implemented by the council, there's a variety of objectives that they're trying to achieve. It outlines how the Chinook salmon are constantly assessed. So we've got scientists working every year, counting fish and trying to assess current conditions. They're constantly looking and bringing the best available science to the council. So every meeting, there's great presentations and updates on, what the leading science and what efforts and projects are going on around the region. They set the habitat goals, the recovery strategies. They review and implement capital projects and recommend a variety of, land use decisions, develop education and outreach campaigns that are implemented throughout the region. And as part of that assessment, they, are always continuing to monitor and adapt the management as needed as part of the council and through the various updates and reports being provided by, like I said, a lot of great folks on these teams throughout all these member jurisdictions, just constantly working and updating this effort. So the interlocal agreement, basically it provides the framework to implement salmon recovery in RIA 8. And it does that by developing and implementing the RIA 8 plan. It provides the governance structure, which is the Salmon Recovery Council. So each member has a voting member called a delegate. And as I mentioned, so when the plans are updated, when there's any funding decisions made, each of these member jurisdictions vote and move these projects and budgets forward. They produce their annual work plans. They work on technical and regional coordination. So, there's different advisory committees. They've got a great technical committee that does a lot of great work at breaking down some of this technical information and then bringing that for the Salmon Recovery Council to digest and make decisions on. And this is, another ILA in a long series of agreements that I've listed here. And as I mentioned, we're currently wrapping up our current 10-year ILA. And I believe the city has been a partner since very early on. So good tradition to continue. This is just provides kind of just a quick snapshot into our current work plan and things we're working on. Again, watershed coordination and policy decisions is a big topic addressed by the Salmon Recovery Council. There's a lot of monitoring and project coordination, and really a big one is just telling the story of salmon. A lot of great outreach comes out of this group to cities and the different committees and groups working on this, and not just the cities, but a lot of nonprofits. So we get to chat with and meet with a lot of nonprofit organizations and educational outlets that get this information out as well. So really collaborative regional effort. Funding is always important. So here's just a snapshot of 2025 ILA funding. The budget was, so for all the participating jurisdictions, was about $760,000. And the Kenmore share was a little over $9,500 of that. And that cost share is determined by a formula they use that averages out the percent of the population and the assessed value and percent of area of each jurisdiction compared to that entire group. So that's how they come up with that contribution. And then they also get a lot of pass-through grants, which help fund projects, and a lot of these are passed on to partners within RIA 8. And the city's been, just looking back in the last few years, just going back to 2022, they've recommended over $200,000 to adopt a stream for Sammamish River work. And then you'll also recall they recommended and got $450,000 for the city's upcoming work on Lake Point. So that was through RIA 8. And just looking back over the life of the Salmon Recovery Council, here's a bullet that they provided, just kind of outlining a lot of the accomplishments they've had over the years. Millions in grants, hundreds of projects. Every bullet to you, but you can see here, it's been a really productive group and effort by all of our member jurisdictions. Looking forward with this next ILA, there's going to be continued emphasis on habitat protection and restoration. I think that really is the trend region-wide. You've heard me come before you with a lot of focus and funding requests for these types of projects. There continues to be the Lake Washington Ship Canal is a real focal point of this group, as it's kind of the last segment there before reaching the Puget Sound. The group's really looking and doing a lot of research into survival issues that Chinook salmon are facing in the watershed. So just list a few examples there, just predation, water temperature, artificial light issues, disease. And they give, this is one of those meetings I always kind of look forward to. I mean, I'm sure as Deputy Mayor Kane can attest, the presentations on these types of things, you know, you're hearing cutting edge updates on the research going on these issues. And then you're seeing, you know, the council digest that and they're making decisions moving forward on how to address these issues. So, and again, you know, monitoring is really key here. So they're always holding themselves accountable, and we try to monitor and adapt to when we need to advance the salmon recovery. So that brings me to the end. And again, I just want to thank the Riot staff. They provided most of those photos and some of the data for me to use tonight. And yeah, they're all been wonderful to work with. With that, that's kind of all I had. I know I don't think there's a lot of concern that you all aren't wanting to, you know, continue this effort, but I know Deputy Mayor Kane didn't want to just kind of bury it in consent. She really wanted to use this opportunity to remind you all, you know, just kind of who Riot 8 was, all the work they're doing kind of behind the scenes, and yeah, happy for questions or comments.
Thank you, Richard. Looks like Councilmember Sassen has a question.
I'm so glad you brought this because we sort of know the work is going on, but it's lovely to revisit in a focused way. So thank you, and thank you for being an alternate. I did just want to clarify for the sake of the financial conversation, $9,533 was our contribution for 2025.
Correct. And
So it's an annual fee, and is that sort of in the ballpark of what we can anticipate looking forward? Or we really don't know because grant funding is,
that amount is pretty consistent. So that's why in the span, the 10-year interlocal agreement, that's why I've estimated, you know, I'd say roughly $100,000 at $10,000 a year. You know, it could slowly grow with inflation. Councilmember Lutz actually brought this up just earlier. And so I looked back 5 years ago, we were paying, now I've already forgot what I responded. I think it was in the mid 8,000 range. So if you just apply some inflation to that, that would put us exactly where we're at 5 years later.
okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lutz.
Yes, you had said the 2020 invoice was $8,139.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other questions or comments? I just would like to thank Richard for bringing this presentation. Riot 8 is an incredible council. The work they do for our region is critical to salmon habitat recovery. The people, as you said, work there, who work for Riot 8 and share their technical expertise and educate the council on the risks and dangers that salmon face, and the pathway to salmon recovery is critical. And I am truly thankful that our city is a member of Riot 8 and that our region gets to benefit with the form of expertise that comes from these meetings. The field trips, if you ever can go on a Riot 8 field trip, I highly recommend it. Seeing the land, the watersheds transformed, is incredible. So I would entertain a motion to authorize the interim city manager to execute interlocal agreement for Chinook salmon conservation planning for the watershed basins within water resource inventory area Riot 8.
So moved.
Second.
The motion in a second. Clerk, would you please take the roll?
On the motion to authorize interim city manager to execute interlocal agreement for Chinook salmon conservation planning for the watershed basins within Water Resource Inventory Area 8, Riot 8. Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Culver.
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Councilmember Lutz.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
With 6 votes, the motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you, Richard. Looks like we have staff reports next, starting with aquatic reed, aquatic weed treatment update presented by Environmental Services Director Richard Sawyer.
Yes, thank you for having me again. Just basically a quick verbal update on our treatment program for this year. So starting first with Tlaquepaque Park, just wanted to let you know that actually last week we started with the first round of treatment with the Prosilacor, which is it's not restricted through any sort of fish window. And so we can use that a little earlier in the season, and that targets milfoil growth. So that was used actually at both parks and is really effective at stopping the milfoil among a few other plants, but that's really the one that we have in this region. And I think they did note quite a bit was starting to grow at both locations. So you'll probably already, I think we're already getting a few reports of folks seeing some impact with that. And then at Tlaquepaque Park, back in January, you'll recall, we're starting some new treatments, really focusing on the algae and cyanobacteria growth in those parks. So starting this week, they're going to be doing a phosphorus inactivation process, which basically takes excessive nutrients that are in the lagoon, and it kind of makes it kind of flocculate out of the water column. And then so it removes that from the water column as well as kind of the shallow sediment areas, and kind of starves the algae and cyanobacteria from continuing to grow. And then they're going to alternate that through the season with a few different treatments with an actual algicide that then any remaining algae and cyanobacteria in the water column, it will eliminate the rest of that. And but this isn't really a long-term solution. This isn't removing the source of nutrients. So it will kind of slowly come back, but we're going to be monitoring the effects of these treatments through the season so that we can work with a consultant to kind of evaluate and put together that aeration system I mentioned in January, which kind of provides that long-term treatment where it oxygenizes the water and creates a more aerobic environment that the bacteria that we'd like to see there are kind of breaking down the nutrients and providing a little bit more sustainable long-term result there. But again, you know, that could take a couple seasons for us to really figure out exactly how to tackle that most effectively. So, but you will see definitely, well, Herrera has assured me that, you know, with these treatments, we should be seeing some different results this year. And then on top of those, our ops crews have started with the surface water skimming. I think they did their first round last week, so they'll be going out there periodically and doing mechanical removal out there with some, it's like a floating wide net that will remove some of the material as it accumulates in the lagoon out of there. So that's really, so quite a bit happening at Tlaquepaque Park over the summer. And then at Log Boom Park, as I mentioned, they did simultaneous, that Prosilacor was applied at the same time last week. And then after July 5th, there is a second round with, that will target any remaining milfoil as well as some of the other weeds we have in that area with the Brazilian Elodea. And then there's a variety of other pond weeds that really grow to nuisance levels in that area. And so we'll be treating that within that fish window after July 15th. And again, what's kind of changed our strategy there, unfortunately, the suction dredging was pretty effective, and it was nice to have that non-herbicide option, but it's extremely expensive. The entire summer's treatments going out at all these various mobilizations is still cheaper than the one time, you know, doing just the area around the dock. So it's just very cost prohibitive, unfortunately, to try and treat that larger area that we're now targeting at Log Boom Park. So just a kind of reminder of what's going on there. So yeah, with that, I mean, any questions? What's going on at either park?
Councilmember Sassen.
Hi, it's me again. When Herrera was here and also Dembowski was here, and we were talking about options for how to manage the aquatic weed was mentioned. A citizen gave testimony, and then Herrera gave testimony that it might be useful to create some sort of countywide ILA to spread the love and spread the cost. And at that time, Dembowski did say that he was open to having that kind of conversation. And I'm just wondering if that went anywhere from that day, or if there's anything to forward that.
Yeah, I think currently the best mechanism that we have in play to hopefully get to that end is the capital investment strategy project that Sammamish River CIS that King County has. It's been very quiet for the last year. I know Councilmember Srebnick actually reached out, and I swear the morning that you sent me that email, that afternoon, after a year, I randomly got an email from the new project manager, and we're meeting later in June. So we'll be having a meeting, and I hope to have new information to update you on that project. But one of the action items in that group is to control aquatic weeds, because it really does. It needs to be the full river coordinating and tackling it together.
Councilmember Srebnick.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for mentioning that, the other group. And I have to say, I imagine that if we move forward with Lake Point restoration, that would also be an impetus because it would have a lot of county dollars behind it. So we could get a more systemic, regionalized approach.
Any other comments or questions for Richard? Well, Richard, we're grateful to have you as our Environmental Services Director. I'm personally thankful for your outstanding work working on the environment in Kenmore. So thank you for your presentation and comments today. We will move on now to Interim City Manager Stephanie Lukash.
Well, I just want to thank Richard, and we're committed to bringing council brief staff reports on issues and questions that you have. I think it's a really effective way to provide information and for the community to hear it as well. So happy to do that in the future and also tonight. And then just wanted to add that just as we heard again tonight, public comments, we take those comments very, very seriously. And following last week's public comments, Tammy Quirk, the interim deputy city manager, and myself met with our police chief, Brandon Moen, to learn more. And those conversations are continuing, and also are including our city attorney. And so just want the council, the community to know how seriously we take this and how important this work is to understand. And we want to thank our public for bringing these important issues forward so that they can be addressed. So I just want to say that tonight, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for the update on that very important issue that came before us. Council member reports and comments. We'll start with Councilmember Culver.
Happy Monday.
Councilmember Marshall.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Councilmember Sassen, I see.
I appreciate our interim city manager mentioning that there's been follow-up with the chief. I think that these citizens have come, to 2 consecutive meetings indicates that they are requiring a response. And I look forward to hearing what the city has come up with. I would be interested in hearing what our DEIA committee has to say. I'd be interested in hearing what our lawyer has to say, what our city attorney has to say about what is possible for us to, in terms of our response. I find it tolerable, the situation. Like, I don't understand how to how this body is and isn't empowered in this regard. I think that's all I have to say today. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, a few things. Yeah, similarly, it was distressing to hear the public comment yet again, and I really do hope staff work with them sooner than later. And I know we talked about that last week. So second thing, I'm hoping that it's okay, and I'm maybe just looking for nods to ask staff to identify when the evergreen ballot measure will be occurring so that we can decide in a timely manner whether we want to do a resolution one way or another. It's not taking a position at this point, but just, I don't want to be caught off guard. So unless there's any, okay. And let's see, I want to thank Stacy Valenzuela and Janet Hayes for organizing a really great event on Saturday. And it was great to see all sorts of Kenmore folks, including, I think we might have inadvertently had a quorum for a part of it. So wanted to say that. And I just want to say, I feel it's so important that we use whatever platforms we have to promote and protect our democracy. Democracy is a verb. And that's it on that one. And lastly, I just want to encourage us and our community to hear from the really great panel of nonprofit housing developers that our staff have arranged for the 25th. I think a week from Wednesday, regarding STEP housing, that's shelter, transitional, emergency, and permanent supported housing. They're coming to help us understand and to answer our questions. And I'm speaking now of the advisory committee, but to answer our community's questions about how these projects operate and how cities and communities can partner with them to make them successful. So I hope folks take that opportunity. It's 5 o'clock on the 25th.
Councilmember Lutsis.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to quickly congratulate the young women on the Inglemoor High School crew team for a splendid job at the national championships yet again. I think we're very fortunate to have such impressive young people in our community, young women in our community who are certainly doing our city proud, especially considering the fact that the program is, less than a decade old. So already competing at such high levels is amazing. So congratulations. Thank you.
And I want to just very briefly speak to something that I think we all have, and just briefly remind with what's happening in the world today. Remembering to see each other's humanity and be able to put yourself in the shoes of those that you don't necessarily agree with. Me personally, my comment, this is just coming from me personally, I'm truly praying for peace every day. That we as humanity find a path to work together for each other, for living beings on the planet, for the planet itself. We are living through trying times, and our humanity is the key to making it through. With that said, and with nothing else to come before us, this meeting is adjourned.